Black Sheep Shipping presents the Prose Modi. Content warnings can be found in the description.
We were supposed to be eternal, a part of the world as essential and enduring as the oceans and mountains, the land and the sun. I did not think I would be the last. I hoped it would be little Magni. Years are meaningless in the face of our history. Things so long-lived and long ago exist beyond your kind and cannot be compared to anything other than itself. Under the same sky, filled with ancient stars, was Asgard. I do not know when it was built. All elder to me claim that it always had been, with no beginning. This great walled city was the capital of an empire, separate and ruled from within. We existed in three lineages: the Vanir, who came from Vanaheimir, the Asir, from Asheimir, and the Jotnar, natives of Jotunheimir, taken from elsewhere. Asgard's tall stone walls were built to keep the Asir and the Vanir protected from the Jotnar, who was said to have been tricked by Grimnir into laying its foundations. The whole of Asgard knew that the Jotnar held a powerful hatred they wished to unleash on all who dwelt within. This was why we tortured them. We repelled them. We bound them for our own protection. We took their crops and tithe and children to ensure our safety. This common belief of the Asir led to traditions of killing all Jotnar who entered our wars, and those highborn would cling to the riches they provided. Because of my father, Asa Thor, and mother Sif, I was highborn Aesir, and was given the honor of guarding the gate alongside Heimdallr. I was respectful to my Asir elder, but in secret, I wished he would fall over the edge. I knew that he had been the one to make me stand at the Bifrost for hours in the rain and snow, while others endlessly feasted, singing drunken lies of their travels and imagined battles. I did not know why Heimdallr had decided to punish me. I was too young to have ever offended him. Stories said that the legendary guardian of the Bifrost did not blink, and I can say there is truth to that. Heimdallr would only open his eyes long enough to find his cup or a bucket before returning to sleep. In a way, it made me very important. No one knew, and I would never tell, but I stood alone at the gate between my people and the brutal Jotnar who lived just outside our walls. My father was intensely proud. An essential part of my duties was also to watch for scouts and nobles approaching the Bifrost, so my superior could rise to greet them and hear their reports. The most notorious of our scouts was also a noble in a sense. Loki was an impossible exception to tradition. Loki was of the Jotnar, but sat at Grimnir's table. There was no other like him. Being a Jotun meant that he spoke their languages and knew their customs. He and all our spies would spread stories of our greatness, battles and feats of strength and cleverness designed to make Asgard invincible in the minds of those we feared. Rumors of ravens through which Grimnir could see, hammers splitting mountains, and control of nature through sorcery. This fear was cultivated further by my father, whose principal duty was to control the population of Jotnar. He insisted on going himself to spread the legends of his heroism and strength. He spread only terror. The Jotnar had no armor, no weapons. My father was a slaughterer of innocence and burner of peace, and his father loved him for it. I opened the gate to unleash him upon the Jotnar, and I was proud. At the turning of the season into winter, a scout came to TUMBLR much earlier than expected. This happened, but rarely. It was not a reason for panic. It only meant that something had happened in his region. He told us that on his arrival, he found a village abandoned with evidence of attack. No bodies, but blood. TUMBLR did not understand why this would happen and told the scout to gather supplies and return immediately. This scout was old and experienced with a lifetime of loyalty buying him our trust. When he refused, he made me wonder what he must have seen to risk the consequences of desertion. TUMBLR had him taken and confined. This death could only be ordered by Grimnir. In the days that followed, something much worse happened. More scouts began to be late. Panic did not start until we realized they were all from the eastern regions. A war, an invasion. We knew. Before anyone else, even the scouts, we knew. I looked at a great man who was born of 9 mothers and felled monsters and stood at the gates of hell. And he was afraid. I had made a mistake he had not. I had assumed that the threat was from outside our realm's borders, where many evil things hunted us. The lands of foreign gods. He told me that if the Jotnar had been killed, there would be bodies, graves. If there had been a marching army, then our scouts would have seen tracks or smoke or soldiers from afar. It was the Jotnar. They were coming for us at last. They were leaving their villages in revolt of us with their only goal, our destruction. I saw a man I had only seen sleep refuse to remove his armor. There was a great debate in our halls for days as my family decided what should be done. My father's wife insisted that there was no danger, but my uncles Balder and Hodor were louder in the old father's ears. They wanted a battle. New stories for their drunken companions and thought an army of Jotun trivial. Loki argued that marching our warriors east would leave us defenseless from all other threats, that a small party of men would travel faster, safer. Grimnir agreed, and my uncles left us, as did 30 of our guard and horses. The time they were away was the coldest I have ever felt. Confidence in them was sung in front of Grimnir and their mother, and the most anxious among us each night, louder with every passing day. We knew where they were from our remaining scouts. We would be signaled by light captured and imprisoned in glass, a gift from Dellinger, a god you would now call an engineer. His signal towers were valuable and rare. Incredible skill was needed to craft the reflected gem at their heart, and one small scratch would make them useless. If they were constructed by Dellinger, 1 in every 50 would properly focus the light so that it could be seen from anywhere. 2 weeks or so after they left, we stopped seeing the light of our scouts. One at a time, our stars went out. When our sons returned, they were only 6. Only Hodor was among them. I had always seen Hodor as a warrior, a god. I saw him as a broken man. We all did. He screamed like a madman of an endless winter, and men like wolves, prophecy and death. He was high family, a son of Grimnir, but the report of our guards was no legend to spread. They told my father that Hodor had abandoned his brother Balder when the Jotnar had first been seen in number. They had been so many that the snow was gone wherever their feet fell, their march deafening. Balder had charged the swarm and fought off 100 alone before the other men joined him. They fought with their bravery. They died scared. The 2 guards had lied, and their story was one that was impossible for them to have witnessed. They were scared too. Scared of my father. If Hodor had not been at fault, it's likely Grimnir's rage would have fallen to them. Only I recognized them as scouts and not soldiers. They'd been through my gate many times. They must have found my uncle, or he had found them. I remained silent as Hodor, now deep in madness, was killed by his little brother Valley. He was so young that the axe took 7 swings to remove Hodor's head from his neck. Loki also had blame. His idea of a smaller party of men, yet the Allfather's eye, killed his sons. Loki was not Aesir or Vanir, and even so would not have saved him. Many hated him for his Jotun blood and success when even Aesir failed. Stories of him fathering monsters and giants made him hated by all who did not know him, and those who did hated him already. All believed that they should have his place at Grimnir's side. No one had reason to save him. It was his sons first. As Thor made him watch as Nari and Vari were torn apart by wolves, begging for their father's help. Oh, I see. No, it was a different Vari. Not the boy who killed Hodor. It makes for a poor story, but it is a common name. I also called him Ali. Nari and Ali, Loki's sons, yes, were torn into pieces by wolves. My father had taken their intestines and wrapped Loki in them. He was tied to Grimnir's horse and dragged through the streets until the screaming stopped and the parts of Ali he was suspended by became ribbons. He lived, but only so he could be caused more pain. If there could be a worse pain, Thor would find it. They would poison him with the painful venom for the Allfather's amusement, cutting him with blades and burning him with irons. It was a temporary distraction from the east. My father said that we should meet the Jotnar in an ambush somewhere in the mountains, or burn the forest to give them no hiding places. A good man, Tyr, argued that our walls were an advantage worth more than surprise. To give them up would be foolish. Titans fought and yelled for hours, but with sunrise came a strange army marching on new daylight. The Jotnar had brought us death, and we were not prepared. The fear made some hide or cry. Others would shout orders that would not be followed, were they meant for anyone at all. I only stood at my position on the gate because I had been there at sunrise. I was the first to see them. While others screamed in our walls and struggled with armor, I could not move. I was later commended for my resolve. I was not resolute. It was that my body thought that if I did not move, then they would march past Asgard, leaving us alive and unnoticed. Like prey, they came slowly. This was not the army we had expected. They were draped in rags and took no formation. They were all shapes and sizes, wails and groans and cries in a language I did not recognize, filled with alien words I could not hear over the distance. Some seemed to walk on 4 legs, and others had bulbous sacks on their backs. They arrived in waves, clawing at our walls, at my gate, the doorstep to our lives. They were starving and unarmed. We would not let them in. They faced Asgard. They were met with oil and fire. They were also met by Tyr, who beyond Loki was the only one who spoke the Jotnar language. There were no soldiers, only the old, the sick, and children. The few men that were there had been starving for some time and were weak with hunger. My father wanted to kill them all for their insult, but Tyr convinced Grimnir that an empire which killed its children dooms itself. Tyr wanted to see if they could offer an explanation of the events that had taken our men and Grimnir's favorite son. I opened the Bifrost with Heimdallr, only enough for Tyr to step out. If there was a god among us, it was Tyr. I wondered why he was not afraid. He was met by a tall Jotun who still projected strength while struggling to stand. He told Tyr that they were what remained of the Jotnar in the east. Villages had been attacked at night, leaving nothing but ash and blood. The discovery caused an alarm to be spread among the Jotnar. Their kin able to fight prepared themselves, gathering together in Utgard, the largest Jotnar stronghold only a day from Asgard. These Jotnar were those unable to defend, sent for protection. After all we had done to them, they sent us their children. Nothing Tyr could say would change what we heard. The Jotnar, by their own admission, had formed an army. They had only crude weapons and no armor, but they were thousands more. The Jotun had asked for food and to shelter in our walls until a signal came for them to return. Many had died already. There was nothing more offensive to the Aesir gods than letting Jotnar flood our streets dressed in rags. Some saw it as letting in infection. Grimnir saw it as letting in spies, betrayers, revolution. The way that my family spoke of the Jotnar, being giants who uproot trees with skin that burns and breath that freezes blood, it made me realize that none of them had been beyond the walls. They lived in the world of stories. Stories of beings the size of mountains, with sharp teeth and dull, violent minds. These were not monsters. We were monsters. That night, the Great Hall of Grimnir fulfilled its purpose as a war chamber. Forseti wanted to pursue a humane end to the Jotnar with poisoned fruits, but was disregarded not for his attempt to give them a peaceful death, but for his willingness to waste food. My father planned to open the gates and kill them his way before sunrise. It was decided quickly. That night I had been on the wall, and only learned of this shallow debate from others. Tyr had killed the Jotnar and many others, but he hated my father almost as much as suffering Loki did. Thor's needless violence and hatred of the Jotnar earned him no love in their hearts. Tyr could not allow this. He saw no justice in it. So, in secret, he conspired against their murder. I do not know how, but he freed Loki from his son's leather used to bind him, and must have brought him to the gate. Loki was weak, but quiet enough to pass unnoticed. He had already opened the bifrost enough for Tyr to begin carrying bags of dried meat and grain through, assisted by Jotnar, who must have been nearby. Tyr and Loki together contained most of the world's cleverness. Whatever the plan was, it would work. I did not discover Loki, but Heimdall did. Of all the hours this man slept, he chose now to rise and stab Loki in his leg. The weakened Loki had already put a knife into his attacker's throat. Even wounded and tortured, Loki knew to stop him from raising alarm. He did not attempt to fight me. He did not run. This was an evil man that I had feared and hated my whole life, told stories by my father, and he now sat in front of me as a traitor, a murderer and a Jotun. I raised my spear, but he only raised his hand. He said he would not harm me, but wanted only to confess. I did not move. Again, I could not move. He knew that I was scared. I could not hide it. He told me that the Jotnar were innocents, and he knew I understood that. This is why he made me serve on the wall. It was not Heimdall that punished me here. It had been Loki. He wanted to give me the chance to see the people my father called for what they were. People. He had his ultimate revenge on my father, taking me from him forever by giving me a conscience. Clever Loki. Only when I began to lower my spear did he run at me. I reacted to an attack and drove the tip in through his stomach and out through his back. He died soon after, smiling. There were many lies spread about Loki, but one was true. He was a trickster. He had left his knife on the edge of the wall. Joke meant for me. I think he knew he would not leave with Tyr. The invention of his assault was not to save his life. He ran himself through by my spear so that I did not suffer the fate of Hodor. He would not stop saving me. I stood and looked out over the wall, watching the Jotnar march west. I watched until they disappeared into the wind and ice, and imagined myself leaving with them. I closed the gate and began to scream. Grimnir gathered all the gods. This is when I actually learned of Tyr's betrayal, and many others who had aided him. A doctor named Air, Baldur's wife, Nanna. But worse still, Grimnir's sons, Vidar and Little Valley. No betrayal wounded him like that committed by his youngest child. Frigga's handmaidens had left with Tyr as well. The queen remained, but not without whispers. It may have been them finding Loki's blood on my hands and body at my feet. It might have been them losing so much in such little time. It did not matter. There were tears as the list of betrayers was read aloud, but I cried because while they were gone, I was no longer alone. This anger did not persist, interrupted by alarms. The Jotnar army of Utgard had been seen moving through the forests. In the night, they would reach us. A war between Asgard and the giants. A war that had been imagined for hundreds of years was at our gates, as was I. Rituals were performed, weapons were sharpened, magic summoned. The gods marched out and watched the horizon. As the sun set, I saw the monsters I had been taught to fear reveal themselves hidden in the trees. These were not the same Jotnar I knew. They screamed different. We had expected something desperate from them, a brute force attempt to overwhelm us with their numbers. But we did not expect them to be so disorganized. Many moved slowly, as if injured, and others ran ahead and threw themselves into our soldiers' weapons for no reason at all. With no weapons, and a smaller number than expected, Grimnir's confidence grew. He saw revenge. Asa Thor led his warriors forward and met them directly. Once closer to the trees, the Jotnar charged, leaping through the air. They tackled soldiers to the ground, clawing at exposed skin. Easily killed, but not without many injuries. Wave after wave of this went on for hours, until there were only distant cries. Not one man fell. All our sons marching through the gates. It was a miracle. The celebration began. Despite all that had happened before, the relief felt in our halls was beyond anything I could have expected. A tension held in the air for our entire lives, gone. It presented new problems, but our walls still stood. Annihilation no more. And then the world burned. Frigga, gifted with foresight, saw our fate first. Drunkenness masked their new natures and clouded judgment. But when Grimnir himself collapsed from his throne, only to bite Frigga's calf, she knew what had happened. I don't know how she knew. I did not drink that night, so only I saw what Grimnir had done. I stood to attend her, but instead we saw each other. We knew that these had no longer been Jotnar. These were no longer gods. She quickly came and led me through the doors of the hall, ordering guards to seal it. She told me to follow, and I obeyed. It was known by her that I had been on the wall, and not in the battle with the others. My salvation. I was told to get my brother and sister and wait at the gates for Frigga. It was still a mystery to me why this was happening, but I trusted her more than her husband, and I could not refuse her. Off I went to fetch little Magni and my elder sister Thrud. I only ran at first, but I began to see fires within the walls and no longer heard distant music. Now I raced. My home seemed untouched on sight. I entered, calling for food. We needed to leave, and I now knew we did not have time. I searched for her, room by room, finding nothing. Instead, only Magni. I wrapped my baby brother and packed what I thought we would need to travel in winter. I called out again for my sister, and I heard Trude's voice below, but not in response. I already wept as I rushed into the street with Magni, but I did not see her. My mother's Sif stood in her place, skin of the scarlet grey, arms different lengths. Her face was swollen with bulbous growths, as if every injury Asa Thor had ever given her was remembered at once. I only knew it was Sif from her dress. At her feet was my sister. Even in moonlight, I knew that it was blood she wore. They covered their eyes and struck all sources of light. The fire seemed to drive them into parts of the city not yet infected. Toward us. Death chewed on stones and bones with cracked teeth through shredded lips, oozing black blood. Sores erupted and features swelled. Some crawled over roofs like vermin. A boy I knew walked on his hands with legs shriveled, muscle and flesh to be used elsewhere. Bones broke by themselves. Mouthfuls of meat taken from terrible screaming things gathered too closely together, too weak to prevent this cannibalism. I stared at them. My curse. Cowardice. Still, Thrud saw me. She did not understand the scene behind her. Hundreds of wolves, hundreds of eyes reflecting at me. She begged me to help. She begged our mother to stop eating her. I watched, and so I abandoned her. I tell myself that I remembered my brother. With Magni, I ran towards the Bifrost, to Frigga. I could hear Sif and others behind chasing us down, but they were slow and confused, irritated. The uneven, desperate steps pounding the stone were only overcome by the sounds they made with their throats. It echoed fury, but the words had no meaning. Words remembered only as noise. Reaching the gate, I saw it was open. Not fully, but enough. I slid Magni and the pack through first, then myself. Their bodies impacted the metal bars like a thunder, breaking the mechanism needed to open it. I, for the first time in my life, stood at the gates of my home as an outsider. I stood where the Jotnar stood, where Tyr stood. I tried to see the faces of these wolves in the light, searching for my mother, but so many pushed against those in front that they were crushed to mangled paste. I rested. I screamed into them, my heart still beating and broken. In such frenzy, they began to devour themselves. They began to devour each other. As the howling ceased and was replaced with the sounds of tearing, I heard my name from above. My brother in my arms, I turned to see a weeping Frigga pointing west. I thought I understood. I carried my brother west, through a battlefield seeded with the dead. Oh, how they bloomed. The slaughtered trolls at my feet only slept with ragged half-breaths dreaming of terrible things. I fled, slowly. To step on one of these dead would be to join them. I comforted the baby in my arms, but he, as he always has, understood things better than I did. Our escape worked for a time, were it not for the impacts of our kin throwing themselves from the wall into the earth behind us. More thunder. They lay broken, to have others rise in their place. There was no urgency to them until they stood fully. Remnants of their injuries prevented them from running us down, but again, we found ourselves hunted. I shed my armor. It made me slow, and there was no hope in fighting with a baby in my arms. I was faster, more deliberate than they were, but they rose all around us. We were only halfway through the cemetery garden. The noises they made grew louder, and so I held my brother in my arms and came low to the ground. I tried to shield him from them. I could hear them everywhere. Then silence. I opened my eyes and saw a faint light which chased them into the trees, causing great agony to those too slow to escape it. This is the nature of Prose. I cried with Magni, both of us children. I looked for Frigga, but saw only smoke. The gods here were dead. So we chased Tyr into the rising sun. I hoped it would be you, Magni.
This episode was written and edited by D.V. Clarke and directed by Alex Valentino. Modi was played by Chris CovVikingVoice Coleman. This episode was announced by Alexander Hanley, with musical theme by Onlooker Air and cover art by OddOblivion. This episode of Black Sheep Shipping is licensed under a Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial Share-alike 4.0 international license. Thanks for listening.